Jamaica Mortgage Bank wants to sell 40% of the company before it goes to market, before that IPO that we've been hearing about for years now. From Wigton days, we've been hearing that Jamaica Mortgage Bank is next, or at least coming up. And now we have an update. So nothing gets us more excited than a letter's IPO, right? So the acting managing director of Jamaica Mortgage Bank, JMB, Jamaica Mortgage Bank, David Wan, is here to break everything down for us. Hi, David.
Leela.
How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. How about you?
Good to have you on. Great to have you.
I need to correct the title. I'm acting managing director of Development Bank of Jamaica.
DBJ. All right.
We're the transaction managers for the divestment of Jamaica Mortgage Bank.
Okay. All right. I saw something in my notes, but I was a little bit confused as to what that was.
Right.
But thank you for clarifying, and welcome to the show once again.
Thank you.
So Jamaica Mortgage Bank has been all over the news lately, but there are a lot of people who don't know anything about Jamaica Mortgage Bank, may have never heard about it. So just give us some background on what this company is.
Okay. At its very core, Jamaica Mortgage Bank is a company that makes loans to real estate developers. That's its core business. So it facilitates housing developments via making loans to real estate developers. It also offers mortgage insurance for those persons who are taking out mortgages with very low down payments. So that if you put down 5% or even smaller than that in buying a house and you get a mortgage for 97%, for example, you can get insurance against default from the Jamaica Mortgage Bank. Those are two of the main lines of business that it does.
So insurance and mortgages, but this is a government-owned entity?
Yes, 100% owned. It doesn't. It's a misnomer. It doesn't offer mortgages. It offers loans to developers of housing.
Loans to developers of housing. So that's why, in ordinary circles, in retail circles, you wouldn't hear about them.
Right, exactly.
But the big guys would know about them.
The institutions know about them, and they're well known. They're a B2B company, basically. They don't do retail per se, except for the mortgage insurance, which is a small part of the business. And incidentally, that's going to be divested separately from the mortgage bank itself.
Oh, so the company is being split into two?
Essentially.
Interesting. Why take that approach?
I'm going to make the long story short. The mortgage insurance business is financed by the government. The capital to provide the mortgage insurance is provided by the government. And it requires, if it goes to private parties, it would need to be regulated. And the government offers this insurance without regulation because of an act that was established many years ago, the Mortgage Insurance Act. So it's a very simple reason. It is much simpler to divest the mortgage bank without the insurance portfolio, which has regulatory implications with it. The mortgage bank itself is not regulated.
Okay, makes sense. In terms of volumes, like how much business does Jamaica Mortgage Bank do, money-wise, a year?
I don't have those figures right with me, but my recollection is over $1 billion in revenue. That's my recollection. I don't have it right in front of me. I have to be careful. Sorry, Carolina. I have to be careful of some of the information I give you because the regulators have certain guidelines.
Right.
About what you can say about companies going to go public, etc., etc.
Right. Why does the government want to divest it?
All right. You would know that the government's business is not in making loans to developers. It's not part of the government's core business. And the government wants to divest anything that makes sense that's not part of the central core of the government. And it's just, and by doing that, you put more economic activity into the private sector, and they can build it up and put in new capital and take it to even higher places than it is right now. So it's just not part of what a government should be doing.
But there is a social component to it as well, in making sure that developers have access to adequate finance, kind of like NHT, but for developers.
Well, NHT also facilitates development, real estate development. Yes, there is a small social component, but the cabinet has decided this is something we want to divest.
Okay, so do we have an updated timeline on when this is going to happen?
A very rough update would be last quarter of this year. There's
That's for the
something.
IPO or for seeking the investor?
No, the investor will come before that. I'm talking
Mhm.
about the public offer for sale of the shares. That
Okay.
would come probably last quarter of this year.
So tell me about the offer that is on the table right now. Why are you seeking to get this 40% investor? Why not just divest 100% through IPO?
All right, very simple. The shares of the mortgage bank are owned 100% by the government. If they simply sell those shares, the money that is paid for those shares would go into the government coffers, not the mortgage bank coffers. So, the government wants to divest the mortgage bank. And in order to ensure that post divestment, there's enough capital to be brought into the company to help it grow and develop and expand, a strategic investor is needed to provide that capital post divestment. None of the money that is received from the sale of the shares goes into Jamaica Mortgage Bank. So that's a simple reason. That's why we
I
need a strategic investor.
I see. So it's different than when they did Trans Jamaica Highway and Wigton
Yeah, that's right.
in that respect anyway. So who would be an ideal investor for Jamaica Mortgage Bank for that 40% ownership? Are you looking at other commercial banks in Jamaica? Are you looking regionally, globally?
We would like to keep it domestic, and we would like to accomplish two things. One is allow the common man to be able to benefit and buy some shares in this government asset that's going to be divested. And we achieve that by having the offer for sale of the shares to the public. So that's one. And two, the as I said, the capital necessary to be injected in the company would come from the strategic investor. And it's a sequencing thing. First, you find the investor, and they agree to buy 40% of the shares. Then they make a commitment as to what capital they can bring to the company, and then you do the sale of the balance of the shares to the public. Did I answer
So,
your question?
not really. So you're looking for a banking investor, or it doesn't necessarily have to be?
Okay, sorry. The second component of the decision to divest the mortgage bank was that we want to be able to deepen the financial sector. Meaning, if this company was divested straight into one of the big established players, it would it wouldn't achieve the goal we have of deepening the financial sector and the players in the financial sector. So in other words, we want a lot of smaller, medium players in the financial sector. So there's diversity in the financial sector, and we have two or three big established players who want a lot of diversity in players in the financial sector. That's
But
why
when you
we
say
didn't just
smaller,
select.
when you say smaller and medium players, will they have the money? Have you made it known how much you're seeking for the 40%?
The figure is not precise. It's not precise. We've had a valuation done, but it's north of 500 million. So yes, we are confident there's investors out there who have the capacity and have the interest to become the strategic investor.
Right. Sean has a good question. Sean wants to know, would the strategic investor that attains 40% ownership have the ability to buy shares on the market to increase their ownership to 50% or more?
Yeah, they would eventually. There's probably going to be a moratorium on anyone getting a majority share for a period, and that is to allow the marketplace to people to come forward, buy shares, etc., etc. As well, that strategic investor could acquire more shares.
So
That's
kind of
about
like so kind of like what you did with Wigton and having that 10% cap for the first 5 years. Not what you did with Wigton, what the government did with Wigton.
right. Similar concept.
Okay. Next question comes from Ryan. Ryan says, so you want Jamaica Mortgage Bank to become a competitor in the real estate market? Is that the objective? So would they broaden their scope from financing developers to financing everyone?
That is going to be really up to the strategic investor and how they want to guide the company after divestment. It's really not up to us.
Okay. Interesting. $500 million, thereabouts, or best offer. Of
No,
course, it's going to be
it's above
negotiable. It's going to be
500.
negotiable based on, what bids you receive. But based on valuation, we're looking at in the ballpark of 500 million. So once it is privatized, well, you already said what the objectives and the goals are going to be. It's going to be up to the strategic investor. So you're saying that with the 40%, they will get to decide what the direction is post IPO, since they will be the majority owner?
They'll be the single largest shareholder. And generally speaking, the single largest shareholder gets to, have a big say because there'll be a board. It won't be just those strategic investors. They'll have a big say in the strategy going forward post divestment.
Right, obviously. So there's also a part of this deal where you're looking at transferring the lending portfolio of Jamaica Mortgage Bank to JMB Developments Limited. So how is that going to figure into this whole deal?
How is it going to figure out? JMBD is the vehicle that we're going to privatize. JMBD is a limited liability company. Jamaica Mortgage Bank is a statutory corporation, and there are certain things that couldn't be done with a statutory corporation in terms of taking it public and divesting it. So it had to be done with a limited liability company.
Mm,
JMBD is 100% owned by JMB, and that is a simple reason why it's been chosen as the divestment vehicle.
okay, understood. Now we get it. Next question comes from Earl. Earl wants to know, why go the route of the stock market instead of letting NHT take it over?
NHT is a government entity. We're trying to privatize it.
Okay. Sean wants to know, will we learn who the strategic investor is before or after the IPO?
I'm pretty sure it will be known before the IPO.
Okay. Gafar has a question. What is the current role of the Jamaica Mortgage Bank in the procurement of development projects in the country? Stats would be good.
Procurement of development projects. They don't do procurement of development projects.
I
They
guess he meant
simply,
funding.
what is their role in funding development projects?
Right. So, and he said stats would be good. So how much money are we talking about? Is this company profitable right now? Um, I think you said earlier that revenue is about $1 billion for the
I
year.
didn't have it in front of me. I just, very rough figures.
Hmm.
Probably more than that. I don't have. I prefer not to get into exact figures right now. It's a
Is it
bit.
is it a profitable company though?
Yes, it's profitable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see if we have any more questions from the viewers. I think we do. All right. Yeah, I think I asked all of the questions from the viewers. Okay, we have one from Orville. What percentage of government revenue does the bank generate?
What percent of government revenue? A very minuscule amount compared to government revenue.
Yeah, I can
Immeasurable
imagine
fraction.
in the grand scheme of things. But the
Yes.
$1 billion, Orville, the $1 billion should give you an idea of where it is. But in terms of a market player, how big of a player is Jamaica Mortgage Bank?
Well, from the research I've seen, there are there are not a lot of competitors for Jamaica Mortgage Bank. The commercial banks tend to not be so gung ho about lending to developers.
Mm. So there is a hole in the market that Jamaica Mortgage Bank.
Yes, they've definitely
Well,
filled the gap in the marketplace.
why is that though? Why do the private companies, why are they reluctant to lend to developers?
I'm
I thought,
generalizing. No, I'm generalizing. No, because many developers out there do business with bank, but I'm generalizing. In many jurisdictions, and America is the one I'm familiar with, developers are sometimes viewed as higher risks than, say, a distribution company or a manufacturing company. That's the general thing. They're viewed as because
I would have thought that developers are a cash cow.
mm, not always, because the market goes in cycles. Prices go up and down, and we've seen it here locally too. When the prices can take big swings, and when they take big swings, if the price of the units fall, then it's possible that the developer could, have a hard financial time because they might be projecting a sale price of X, and suddenly, if the market shifts, you're getting 50% of X. That equation can cause problems.
I find it a little bit strange though, because you need the developer in order to build a property to have the retail end. Um, I'm finding it curious
All
that
right,
you said you
let's put it this way.
challenge there.
Jamaica, real estate in Jamaica is a bit different from the US. Jamaica's real estate market is more similar to Hawaii, Hong Kong, Singapore. It is a very small amount of land, and that, in my view, has kept real estate as a very good investment for many years in Jamaica. In the US, there are some vicious cycles that, in the 2008 crisis, things took a huge plunge. They're back up now. But I remember in the 80s, there was a similar downturn for many years in the US in real estate. So we're a little different. We're a small island. Barbados is like us too. Barbados, Jamaica, Singapore, Hawaii, Hong Kong. Small spaces, and the real estate prices are buoyant because you're in a very small space. So that's how I would summarize the difference.
Okay. I'm going to take a couple more questions from the audience. Sean wants to know, does JMB offer special interest rates for its customers compared to other banks? What sets it apart from its competitors?
JMB gets its funding from borrowing from financial institutions and on lending that to developers. Its real advantage is not so much in the interest rate. but also in the expertise it has because it focuses on lending to developers. So it understands the development business. It can offer guidance to developers who are relatively new because they've done it so long. So it's really a combination of things. The interest rate is not a big competitive advantage. It's
It
their
sounds,
market
sounds like
knowledge.
sounds like the interest rate is actually higher than from the commercial banks if they're borrowing from commercial to on lend.
I would say that in some cases, yeah, and some of the banks have huge um, funding bases that are very low cost, and they might be able to lend at a lower rate. But it's not all in the interest rate. It's their market expertise, the niche that they're in, that makes them really good at what they do.
All right, Andre's gonna. I think this is the last question. Andre said wants to know what is the current value of JMB assets. Does the entity has any debt, and what is the dollar value?
It has a positive net asset value. It has debt, but again, it has positive net asset value. And the dollar value, you will find out in due course, very soon, what the dollar value of the net assets are.
All right, follow-up question coming from Sean. Did you mention the requirements needed for an entity to qualify as the strategic investor, that 40% investor?
Well, there are quite a few, but the major ones is the ability to have the money to pay for the shares, and two, the commitment to inject further capital into the company post divestment so it can grow and prosper. And you have to have business expertise, not necessarily in the construction business, but general business expertise and a knowledge of lending, etc., would be helpful. So it's a scoring system that we're going to evaluate. We did a tender for the strategic investor.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so what are the timelines on that tender process?
The tender is already closed, so I expect within a month or so we'll be able to sit down with the a selected investor and negotiate something.
Can you say how many bids you received?
I can't say that right now.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll hear when the time is right. And of
Yeah.
course, we'll hear who finally was selected. But you did receive bids.
Yes.
All right, good. Well, thank you so much, David. I appreciate you. And we will look out for the updates when the time comes.
Yeah. You're welcome. Bye now.